So I'm here on Stadium where the crews continue to put electrical lines onto the newly in place power poles. When they got here, the poles were snapped and literally leaning on the electrical lines. I just wrapped up at Jesse Hall here. Now the biggest issue seems to be students just not feeling like they belong on campus. 19% of the respondents said that they felt some sort of exclusionary behavior. Now that could be harassment, bigotry, racial profiling. I'm holding the discussion points given to the volunteer lobbyists here at the Capitol. It's unclear how the drugs got into the home, but it's clear the two men could be facing time in prison. One Republican commissioner urged his constituents on Facebook to support the measure. That's where I met Paul Prevost. If the tax passed and I wanted to buy a Chiefs hat, I'd have to pay the same taxes here online that I'd pay in a store on Broadway. Planned Parenthood, the NAACP, and 10 other organizations rallied together today at the state capitol to protest the General Assembly's agenda. I spoke with several Missourians today who urged Governor Greitens to spare the life of Marcellus Williams, who's convicted in a 2001 murder. He has claimed he's innocent, and recent DNA evidence rallied opponents of the death penalty to Williams' cause. Representatives from the NAACP, interfaith councils, and opponents of the death penalty came to Governor Greitens' office Tuesday with a petition of 200,000 signatures.
He's actually not in the office right now, so...
urging him to halt the execution of Marcellus Williams. The group met with office representatives at noon, and at 1:30, Governor Greitens stayed the execution.
I was ecstatic. I was in class. I about jumped out of my seat.
You know, power to the people kind of thing. You know that we can do it if we hang together.
The opponents of the death penalty originally planned to hold a vigil Tuesday afternoon to honor Williams. Instead, they continued the awareness campaign for his exoneration.
This is a case that should trouble all of us. Any murder in our community is something to be troubled by, and to try to do what we can to help support murder victims and their loved ones who are grieving such a loss.
One opponent of the death penalty says this victory is only the first step.
That's just step one, but we haven't accomplished the ultimate goal yet. And if we can push this issue into the minds of everyone that drives by here, then that's the goal of this today.
The governor appointed a board of inquiry to further investigate the case, and the group says they'll be watching. The board will be made up of retired Missouri judges, and they will have subpoena power. In the studio, Chris Joseph, KOMU 8 News. The responses I got varied this afternoon, but it's clear the legal definition of the term terrorism has not been met. I spoke to 2 law professors and a social justice speaker about why this is the case. The Las Vegas mass shooting this week left more than 50 dead and 500 plus wounded, but the attack hasn't been labeled as terrorism.
It was an act of pure evil.
An MU law professor says investigators must know the motive of the shooting first, something they haven't found yet.
That being so, it would be impossible to classify what happened as terrorism or not terrorism, because it's the why that matters.
U.S. law says domestic terrorism must be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping.
Horror at the hands of a psychopath.
An MU journalism law professor says journalists can't use the term terrorism unless they know it's accurate.
The emotional content of some terms, I think, increases the duty of journalists to make sure that indeed that is the term that's applicable.
Social justice speaker Amir Ahmed spoke at MU Tuesday night and says terrorist continues to be a racial term not applicable to white shooters.
Suspicion comes onto people who look like me, and experiences of racial profiling and discrimination and ends up being attached to people who look like me, with names like me, with religious backgrounds like myself.
Understanding the tragedy in Las Vegas is an ongoing process, and so is the way America defines it. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the shooting, but investigators haven't found any evidence of that being the case. In the studio, Chris Joseph, KOMU 8 News.